So what I wanted to talk about is the app exchange. Basically, we have this really cool flow analyzer app, right? And I wanted to speak with you about how you go basically from zero, having no idea about the app, how you go from like coming up with the ideas, then productizing it, making to like actually working product for Salesforce, then bringing it actually on the market for in app exchange, not app exchange, can be anything. Um, that's what I would love to talk about. But first of all, maybe tell people what, if they don't know who you are, if they don't know anything about Flow Analyzer, what is this thing?
Yeah, so I'm Alec. I'm basically just a Salesforce engineer, architect, whatever you want to call it. I just kind of fill the role that needs to be filled. Um, I've been in the ecosystem for about 7 years, and yeah, what I'm most known for is the Flow Analyzer, which is, as you mentioned, an app exchange app that I released back not this past January, but the previous January. It's gotten a lot of traction. Got I think about 1,200 installs at this point, so um, definitely seems like it's getting a fair amount of usage. But yeah, I mean the whole process of the app exchange was very foreign to me as well. Starting out, I didn't know anything about packaging. I didn't really know anything about kind of anything with that whole process. I was working at Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time, which is a really large healthcare insurance company in the U.S. And we were going through a workflow to flow migration, and to give kind of the scale of that organization and their footprint in Salesforce, they had I think 13 Salesforce orgs with roughly I think 20,000 users. So as an organization, when you're going through a
Crazy.
migration like that with that large of a scale, like obviously it's just a huge undertaking. So peer review was taking forever, and my team was actually partially responsible for that, but also partially responsible for we were working on trying to standardize our rule sets and everything for static code analysis. So in my head, I kind of blended the two ideas. I was like, God, it would be nice while we were in a meeting talking about the static code analysis tools and what rules they had. I was like, it would be nice if we had this with flows, because then peer reviews would go a lot faster. You don't have to check for hard coded IDs and things like that. That you can just trust an app to look for stuff like that, the more simple stuff, and you can look at things at a more, I guess, structural level and kind of talk about or look at the implementation instead of just looking in all the nooks and crannies to see if there's anything hiding. So yeah, I brought it up to my colleagues and I was like, well, let's look to see if there's anything on the market. Didn't find anything. So then my head goes to, well, maybe I can build it. Um, so that's kind of where the idea came from. The app basically just acts as static code analysis for flows. So it'll evaluate best practices for flows. It'll find record updates inside of loops, sockle inside of loops, all of those types of best practices that are kind of generally accepted within the industry. The app exchange process is different. I didn't know anything about it. I was actually probably 85% of the way through developing the app itself before I even started the process of working with Salesforce to kind of get everything listed or get everything set up. And it takes a bit of time. It took especially even longer because originally when I was building the app, I was actually going to make it a paid app. I wasn't going to put it out for free because I was like, well, I'm putting a lot of work into it, and I want to potentially be rewarded for that. And so I originally went down the app exchange path of making it a paid app, um, which Salesforce takes you a lot more seriously when it's a paid app, because then they get their 15% of whatever your net revenue is off the top. So it was a very interesting situation when I went to them and I said, I think I'd actually like to make it free. And it didn't the first that conversation, they seemed, my account exec at the time seemed a little bit baffled by it. The person who was working with me on it, she was like, why would you want to do that, like it's a and they just didn't really seem to get it. But I had a conversation with, one of the more prevalent DevOps folks in the ecosystem, and he really kind of pressed me to say, like, really think about whether or not you want this app to be paid and what goes along with all of that. And, kind of after weighing those options is how I came out to being like, you know what? I think I just want to make it free, and it's just something cool that I built, and hopefully it gets a lot of use, and maybe gets my name out there.
What was the decision that tipped the scale for making it free? Why at the end you decided to make it free?
To be quite honest, I hadn't thought about. I thought, oh well, the app will sell itself, and then I was like, well, actually, because he was talking to me and he was like, well, what makes you think that? I was like, well, it's like, people people in our ecosystem obviously are looking for tools to make their lives easier, but then he was like, well, the people making the decisions on what is being bought aren't the admins, aren't the architects, aren't the developers. It's the people on the business side who own the platform. At the end of the day, more often than not, the budget for Salesforce is not coming from the same team who's administering Salesforce. So they don't really care if there's this cool productivity tool. If even if it's only, call it $5 a month or something, they're not going to want to pay for it. So I realized very quickly that I was going to have to put a lot more work into doing the things that don't really excite me, like the selling, the always be pitching and all of that marketing. And I was just like, okay, I just like building apps and I like building cool things. So I was like, that was my whole thing. I just wanted to build something cool and put it out. So that's why I decided to switch it.
You still need to pay on App Exchange for the free app, right?
No, no,
No.
the app is completely free. I mean, I paid $1 to get the security assessment done.
Okay, no,
Um,
I mean you need to pay for the Salesforce. I thought that like they have a security review. This is what I thought. Like they have a security review, and you have to pay for the security review to the Salesforce.
yeah, so for paid apps, that's I think about $1,000 per submission for the security review. However, if your app is being listed for free, they give you a voucher so that it only costs $1 to get reviewed. So I don't think they can make the review fully free, but they just make it cost, $1. So that was another nice thing is I had never gone through the security review process, obviously. So I was like, oh man, because I would say probably at least 50% of apps don't make it through on the first go of the security review because it is relatively robust. So I was like, oh, what if I had to submit this for a second time or even a third time? And I, had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, and I was just like, that's another kind of negative thing that I would have to think about if I was going to make this a paid app. Like, even just getting the fixed cost back that I put in to get it reviewed is potentially going to take me a year if I am charging relatively low, subscription costs.
So basically, you didn't wanna market it, and you decided to make it free, so it kind of markets itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically been through word of mouth. I've had some blogs reach out to me, to write articles and things. Like I wrote for Salesforce Ben, I wrote for Flow Canvas, different blogs and things that were interested in the app. I had Daryl Moon wrote a review of it out of the blue, and I saw my installs like this. You just see this in because you can see a chart of like your installs, and there's just this spike. It just goes straight up and down. On the day that he posted his article, I must have gotten 400 times as many subscribers as many installs as I had previously. It was nuts.
So I'm super interested. How does it work, like internally? What do you like? What exactly like? What is the nerdy part behind it? Why didn't we have this tool before, basically?
Yeah, so I mean, really, what it does is it looks at the flow metadata, which is XML. My app actually uses the tooling API, so it analyzes it as JSON. So the first thing I had to do, this was before a lot of the generative AI stuff existed. I had to write a wrapper class for the flow metadata, which took me like a full week of like
Mm.
multi-hour days, like 3 hour days of just writing like classes and subclasses. It was just horrible. But I was like, I have to write a wrapper class or else this is just going to get too unwieldy. Today I would just go to Chat GPT and say, hey, write me a wrapper class for flow metadata, and it'd probably spit out 90% of it for me. Um, but yeah, and then basically I developed algorithms to evaluate that metadata to determine certain best practices that, are being violated. So whether that be hard-coded IDs, it's using regex to search for those within Apex. The whole thing is built native to Salesforce, so it's all basically Apex driven. The whole rule engine is. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was just about developing algorithms to identify using the flow metadata any violations of best practices. And I actually found out that there was a tool that existed prior to the Flow Analyzer that I was not aware of at the time when I was building Flow Analyzer. And I was actually almost dev complete on the Flow Analyzer by the time I figured out that this other tool did exist because somebody mentioned it to me on like a LinkedIn post. It's called Lightning Flow Scanner. So this is it's a Salesforce CLI plugin. So you can use this app within like a local VS Code repository. You could use it in any like CI/CD pipelines and things like that. It just didn't have the pretty user interface at the time. So I think that's the reason why my app got a lot of traction when it did, was just because it was more admin friendly. And I obviously you're in the realm of teaching admins how to be developers, but not every admin, has that desire or wants to kind of go through that, obviously. So having a clean UX that sits on the Salesforce platform is definitely something that I think kind of drove a lot of engagement with my app.
You have a dog? You have a dog? How many dogs do you have?
I have two dogs. The one of them loves to lay in my office and bark at inopportune times. So,
That's fine.
but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work to build. I think for about a year, I was waking up at 4 a.m., coming down into my basement and just writing code or working on algorithms to determine, what violations might look like. There were actually certain rules that I wanted to implement, and I didn't actually figure out a way to implement them. Like there was one rule where I think it's nested decisions is a rule that I like in most like um like PMD and stuff like that you can do with code analysis. I could not for the life of me think of a way to implement that in a flow because of just the way that the metadata is structured. I was like, I can't figure this out. I must have spent probably 2 weeks trying to figure out what an algorithm might look like to identify that, and it just never came to me. And I'm sure that somebody smarter could probably figure it out, but that isn't me.
I'm curious, can you do what you're doing with the flow analyzer? Can you now do it with the AI? Instead of having like a hard-coded algorithms, you feed it into some kind of AI and you prompt it with the right rules, right? So those algorithms that you basically coded there to find with the whole XML data, you just prompt it and then you say, hey, analyze this XML.
Yeah, I
Can
mean, I
you
definitely
actually do
think you
that?
can. I don't see a reason why not. The AI algorithms are just getting so much better at like determining, and I think it really would be all about engineering the right prompts. To telling it exactly what it needs to be looking for is going to be a huge piece. But I mean, I even had conversations with some folks who were building, in what they called AI admin for Salesforce, and they wanted to talk to me about Flow
It's
Analyzer
interesting.
and learn a little bit more about kind of what makes it tick, what best practices it's evaluating, and sort of how it's evaluating that. And they were even hoping that I might be able to export some of the customer data to them from that. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I don't pull any data. I don't pull any metadata. The only time that the app ever interacts with anything outside of your org is when you're originally going through the auth flow, and that's really just because I needed a single redirect endpoint to point everything to, but it basically just passes it right back along to the org. So a lot of people there have been a number of people who have approached me about exporting data from the app to, I don't know exactly what they want to do with it, I guess, but I
They wanted that you sell them the data or something like this.
it was more so like I was approached by a couple of, and one of them was even kind of a very well known um, application, but it's really just about they want to be able to understand, pair the XML with what's being spit out by the engine and let the AI figure out how that's being determined. I think was the end goal for them. Um, or at least that's what I, kind of gathered from conversations. But yeah, I mean, I don't know a ton about how any of these AI engines are trained or anything like that. So, I mean, who knows what sort of potentially nefarious plans these people had to get the data.
Yeah, I think it's also valuable, when if you have a company that does anything with the flow in general or with like admin, how admin work, if you can kind of export whatever, like 20,000 usages, how people used flows, I think it's quite valuable for you to analyze the data and see how people actually use it. And then you can just use it for whatever app you're developing because you can target those people and speak in the same errors and messages and whatever, how they in their flow language, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned AI admin. Can you what was that? Like you spoke to the guys who are building AI admin? I hear about this for the first time. What was that?
Yeah, and I mean this might be a free plug, and they weren't actually these particular folks weren't asking me for data, but Wrestle AI, I think it's RESSL, they approached me to first off talk about the flow analyzer, and this was when they were sort of in beta with their product, and they wanted me to take a look at it. Unfortunately, I think that I probably wasn't as helpful as they thought I might be because I didn't have a ton of time at that particular moment to take a look and dive deep into it. But yeah, I mean, I've followed their journey and it seems like they're taking off. I know that they've spoken at a couple of conferences now, so I mean, it seems like a really cool product, and I definitely think that it could help folks. I just haven't had a ton of time to really take a look at it. So I guess this is not an official endorsement, but check it out if you're interested.
Okay, so another thing that I wanted to speak about is hackathons. The hackathons. Uh, we both kind of regretting that there are no hackathons in
Mm.
Salesforce. Why do you think it's the case?
So, I mean, there used to be, and I actually
Really?
spoke with, Peter Chittum and other folks who, I mean, they were the ones at Salesforce who ran the hackathons. And I mean, you do see, they've got like the AI hackathon that they did this past year where they've got, pretty good prize money and everything like that. But I think it just became, in their eyes, it was more so a way to attract engineering folks from different disciplines to Salesforce. Because if you can put a hackathon on, I think that they actually had $1 million hackathon at some point,
Oh,
which was crazy.
wow.
I don't think in the ecosystem at the time, or if I was, just a Salesforce baby. Um, but yeah, I mean, it seems like there used to be Salesforce sponsored hackathons. I don't know how frequently they would happen, but when I was speaking with certain folks about potentially putting on a hackathon, um, it seemed like it was much more prevalent a few years ago. I don't really know why it's not really a thing anymore. I don't know if people just don't want to put forth the effort to kind of coordinate everything. Um, Obviously you and I had a conversation about potentially setting one up, and I think it would be really cool, but I definitely think that there are challenges. It's difficult, like especially depending on how you end up structuring things. Like what I was told is that, the judging can even get heavily, heavily scrutinized. Where, if teams are believe that they should have placed more highly than they do, then it's like very much they're out here, basically trying to detract from whatever it is that you're doing, which is why for the hackathon concept that I was potentially going to put together, which was that LW Chaos hackathon, the whole goal of it was just to be ridiculous. I wasn't going to put any big prize money towards it. I think that I was saying first prize would potentially get like 500 or something like that. Like not a ton of money, not enough money for people to get really truly upset. And it was going to be on the outset that judging is going to be totally subjective. There's going to be parts of judging which is just like how, funny or how ridiculous is the thing that you built, Um, so I'm definitely looking to still put that hackathon on. It was just things picked up in my day job that I just didn't end up having enough time to actually put towards planning it.
I understand. I also I wanted to do the hackathon for probably like Salesforce hackathon for the last 5 years, if not 6 years. I took part in one Salesforce hackathon, like a local company here in Munich, local Salesforce consultancy. They organized the hackathon. So they said, "Oh, okay, so we have a hackathon, like it's for developers. We have it like a developer hackathon. Come to us. We have like nice drinks, party, and whatever." And then I was the first year working as a Salesforce developer. I was like, wow, crazy. I'm so excited. I'm going there. And then I'm walking in, and then I just see everyone is like working on their, like still working, because they made it on like 5 p.m. or something to
Mm.
start. And I see everyone is still working. So I'm kind of walking. I'm like, hey, do you guys have some hackathon here going on? Or what's up? Don't see the drinks. And they say, yeah, 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 go there, go like upstairs, then go to the roof. And then I go there and I see like 5 people sitting there in total, and they all wear the same t-shirt of this company. And I like end up basically the only one outside of this company who came to this hackathon. And we competed, and I was the only one developer there. All the other people, they were like half admin, half developers. So we end up developing some kind of like PDF thing or whatever, like something with Visual Force. And it just happened to be the exactly same thing that I developed for one of the clients, like basically a couple of weeks ago. So my team just won the first place, like with the big advantage of me just basically out of pulling out of my GitHub and like just spitting out the solution. So it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And I wanted, you know what I wanted to do? I had this crazy idea that if I'm going to go to US, I'm going to pick like a date where Salesforce does some kind of world tour or something, like in the city, whatever city they choose. Let's say Chicago. They choose Chicago, and in the exact same time when they do it, we're gonna do in parallel like 1 day hackathon. And we invite like only developers, we do a proper hackathon. We find the sponsors, we do like a 1 day event, and we have some good prizes for people who win. That would be that, like, someone, if someone is listening to this, guys, someone needs to do it. Someone needs to do it. It's a great idea. I just don't have the time and capacity and the energy to do that. But I think that would do well.
That's actually exactly what, when I was talking to, the folks from Salesforce who ran the hackathons, that was their suggestion. They said if you're going to do it in person, pick an event, a Salesforce event that will have people kind of gathered into one city, and then do it in conjunction with that event, either the day before, day after, maybe one of the days of, like the last day where maybe like the keynotes aren't there, and the big draw kind of isn't going to take away from anything that you're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be awesome. I was definitely looking to try and put together like a virtual hackathon, but I mean, it's just so difficult, like trying to coordinate all of that. And I was talking with some of the folks who put together FlowFest, which is probably the biggest Salesforce hackathon at this point that I'm aware of. And they were talking about just the whole production. It takes 3 or 4 of them just to in the background, just kind of like screening people and doing all of these different things that you don't even think about need to be done. Like, I was like, oh well, I'll just be commentating, and I'll just be kind of producing it myself. And they're like, good luck, because it's going to be incredibly difficult. So yeah, I mean, it just I like I said, I'm still interested in putting one together. Just gonna need an army of people to assist.
Yeah. And another problem is that you need to either find some kind of audience that's already there somehow. Like for example, the Flow Fest, I think it's by Salesforce Ben, is organized, right? So they have a huge traffic, they have a lot of people. So you either need to hijack someone else's traffic, or you need to like actually own quite a big of audience to for this hackathon to matter. Because if you have like 5 10 people there in hackathon. I think it's kind of boring if you have like 5 people sitting there.
Yeah, because I think when I had originally still had the event on, I think I only had 5 or 6 registrants. And I think it was a month before the actual event was supposed to be occurring. And I was posting once or twice a week about it and just wasn't getting much traction. And it got to the point where, things, like I said, in my day job started to pick up. And I'm like, I might be able to like keep both of these tracks going, but it doesn't feel like this one's really going anywhere. So I'm not going to put the additional effort into it at this time. Not saying that I won't in the future, but it's just difficult to justify to yourself, working a 10-hour day for your day job and then 2 more hours in the day just trying to coordinate this stuff, especially with, a family and everything. It gets tough to justify to yourself.
That's why you need to like always find a way to charge money for that. That's why I was so asking so much about like free versus paid app, because I'm charging for anything I can, not
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so greedy. Also because that, but also because I'm like, if I don't charge for it, I don't feel like I'm gonna be investing 100% of my energy into it, right? Also for the people who are joining, if they're not paying or not getting something out of it, they're not gonna invest as much energy.
Yeah, for sure. And like going back to the paid versus free, one of the biggest selling points for me about the potentially with my app making it free is I was already pretty confident going into like any interview that I was going into because I just felt good about my skill set. I felt like I could answer really any questions. But now the first thing that's listed on my resume before I even get to like work experience or anything like that, like the top thing that's on my resume is my app, because to me that's I'm going to give you the exact URL that you can go to download the thing that proves to you that I know what I'm doing and that I can design and build a full scale application myself. So, to me that kind of helps me with, and I actually haven't had to use it because I haven't really had to interview for a job recently, thank goodness, but it gives me peace of mind were I ever to go on the job market. I feel confident that I could land a job that I would really like, and it wouldn't take all that long.
Would you recommend for someone who is, for example, either switching roles or trying to get into the first developer, architect, admin role? Would you recommend to those people actually trying to develop something like you developed and put it out on the market?
Yeah, what I would say is you don't have to have the most unique idea. If there's something that already exists in the marketplace and you feel like I wouldn't mind building an alternative to that or building something that's similar to that but also does this. That to me feels like a really good project for someone who might be switching from like you were talking admin to developer. If there's an app that you at your company use and you like certain functionality from it, just build something that's like it. I mean, you don't even have to put it on the App Exchange. You can just have a GitHub repo, but it's something to point to when you're in the interviewing process that says, I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm not just talking and saying I can do these things. I have physical proof that I can do these things. Let me show you. So, I think that it's super valuable. I do think that actually listing something on the App Exchange takes a lot more time and effort that might not be worth it unless you truly think that the app that you're building is going to gain traction. But put something out there. That's something that I very much believe in, is put something out there that proves your work and something that you can take with you, because everything that you're doing for your current company, you're not going to be able to take any of that with you without potentially having legal issues follow you there.
What are the areas that you see for people to build something? What are the areas, ideas that someone can just steal from you?
I mean, I'm stealing one right now where my next app idea is to basically build a platform that does ETL. So I want to be able to do API based ETL in sort of a point and click fashion with some sort of like canvas builder or something like that. So that's something that I'm working on. Admittedly, not working on too much right now because of just the other obligations. But that's my next project. And there are probably 20, 30 different apps on the App Exchange already that do it. Mine will be free. So, that will be one thing, and most of the other apps are paid. But like just doing something, if you think that you can build something like that, or I mean, it's low hanging fruit. Even if there's just, say you built some cool opportunity automation, or you think that there's like some components that maybe you think could be built for flows, package them up, potentially put them on the App Exchange. I mean, there are plenty of apps like that where, there's a handful of Lightning Web components that can go kind of just plug and play in flows. So like things like that where it's helping you practice with the technology, and maybe you even expand into other technologies that you haven't worked with before, like in order to make user experience a little bit better. Say you do kind of build that flow toolkit or whatever you want to call it, a bunch of Lightning Web components. Well, maybe you tack on some custom property editors to those Lightning Web components and make them more easily configurable, instead of having to just like maybe type some JSON into a text field. Maybe you give them, sliders and this and that. You build Lightning Web component to configure your Lightning Web component.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say to people when they try to switch into development, for example, um, try to build kind of like your own startup, mini startup, right? It doesn't have to be crazy. Um, it doesn't have to go anywhere. You can just put it out on the GitHub. But just the thing that you try to do something that has any kind of like real world value, that's already enough. And if you don't have any ideas, just take something that is a paid app that you think it's easy to do, or you can implement like a small part of it, and try to do it for free. And people are gonna like it because people already paying for it, right? So people are gonna be using it. And probably while you're going to be doing this, you're going to find out that it's actually way harder to do because there's always like a big team or many years of development behind it.
Right.
Uh, but at least it's going to bring you to the level where you can say that you developed something real world if you don't have any experience.
And even that gives you a different appreciation for the apps that are out there on the App Exchange. It makes you feel like, wow, like there was so much work that got put into this. And like you mentioned, there's probably, for a lot of these paid apps, there's teams of people behind it. But um it's definitely, it gives you a different level of understanding. And I mean, I'm working with, like I mentioned, things that I've never worked with before. When I was working through developing, this new ETL app, like something that I hadn't worked with was external services, which is, basically the Flow APIs, where it's the setup for that, where you can set up, basically you use a JSON configuration file for, or like a YAML configuration file. I never worked with any of that with like open API specs and stuff like that. And the first part of the project, I was doing a proof of concept on how do I generate those open API specs based off of user input and create an external service, because then I can potentially tap into wrapper classes that don't actually have to be Apex classes, because they have these external, Apex classes that Salesforce can create. So there's just like so many things that you'll end up looking into and diving into and understanding just so much more by building something than you would otherwise. I mean, even just using something, you might not even understand how it works, but when you get really deep into kind of the nitty gritty, then you truly understand kind of what's going on.
Would you open source your tools? Yeah, they're not open source yet, right?
No, no, I have talked about, for certain parts of the new app, I do plan on open sourcing. So like I said, I built kind of that open API spec generator application that I plan on putting out as like an open source project. One, because if somebody wants to use it, they can use it. I'll even throw a package ID on it, so that if they just want to, basically say, okay, I have package A and I want it to depend on this package that already exists, then you can just add as a dependency. But the other reason is kind of selfish is that, again, I haven't worked with open API specs very frequently, so I'm sure that my algorithm is probably not the best at determining and building these open API specs. So if anything, people are probably going to be more knowledgeable than I am on it, and they might contribute to the project and make it better.
So I think open source is pretty cool, but I don't think it's like once I developed like a nice DevOps like mini tool. It was not something fancy, but it was like just nice like deployment analyze and like difference and blah blah blah. Uh, and someone said to me, you should just open source it. And then I looked up at my code and I said, this code it cannot be open source. I don't want to show it to anyone. Like in 3 weeks I'm gonna look at this code and I don't want to look at this code. It's just so bad, but it works. If you do it as a free app, it works. No one can see your code. If you open source it, you have to make your code kind of at least pretty.
And there are certain parts, like when you're really thinking about developing a Salesforce app that has to utilize Salesforce APIs, and if you want it to make it through like Salesforce's security review, the way you handle authentication, even you need things that can't be open source. Like you have to have a set of credentials that you're able to put into an installer org that you set up as protected custom metadata so that in the org they can't see it, but it has to be in the repo, right? Like you can't build the package without it. So what you end up with is there are certain parts where if you tried to open source it, you couldn't, because then people have, they have certain pieces of metadata that you just can't have leaked because it ends up being a security concern.
Totally. I think so. ETL. What is the ETL actually?
Extract, transform, and load. So it's basically the
Okay.
way to move data between two systems. So
Mm.
the new app is basically just if there is an API through which that can be accommodated, then this system would allow you to essentially hook into that API. It'll have kind of batch classes that can be run to extract the data, transform the data in any way that you want to, and load it into Salesforce or the other direction. So if you want to push Salesforce data to another application through the API, then this app will allow you to do that as well. And Salesforce actually just made GA a big piece of this that I was really dreading if I had to build myself. But now that you can evaluate formulas in Apex, that's a big piece of something that I was looking to build, because I was like, if I have to build my own engine to evaluate formulas, that's going to be a huge burden. But now, their formula evaluation engine is available through Apex, so that's going to be a big piece of the transformation in ETL. At least in my app.
I see. I see. What else would you build if you had more time?
I have been getting. You kind of mentioned DevOps. I've been getting a lot more into DevOps as well. At my current role, we are implementing Salesforce for the first time, and that has given me a lot of kind of ability to do things that I would probably not have had the opportunity to do. Like we are using a package-based development model instead of using an org-based development model. So we have what's called unlocked packages that we're using as basically just modularize all of the code and everything in our org. So that's something that I've wanted to do now for probably the last 3 years. When I was at Dreamforce last in 2019 was when they were kind of rolling this out. And I remember attending a couple of sessions and being like, this is the coolest thing. Like coming back to reality in my day job and realizing, oh, our org is way too mature. It's going to take way too long to implement something like this, because you have to basically refit everything in your org to have it be packaged. So being able to start with a fresh org, a green org, allowed me to do that. And that kind of got me into DevOps, because I actually had to build all of our DevOps pipelines in Azure DevOps. So I would like to build something that does DevOps for packaging, um, so that maybe an admin can do it, because it is very CLI heavy. Like you basically are building the package through CLI, you're installing the package through CLI. Like everything that you're doing is basically driven off of CLI. So whether that be creating templates for ADO and GitHub, or whether that be actually creating a Salesforce packaged application that allows you to, hook into the tooling API or something and build these packages on the fly. That's something that's always been interesting to me, or more recently.
I think DevOps is still like it got really popular like in the last 2-3 years. I think DevOps got really popular in Salesforce, but it still has a long way to go in comparison to all the other ecosystems. So
It's
I think
just
there's a
so
lot of
tough.
apps to build.
It's just so tough because Salesforce DevOps, like, you're reliant on the metadata API, and there are so many like weird little quirks and things that have to do with the metadata API. Like, I personally have been victimized by trying to deploy an Experience Cloud site, and I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
other people have too. Like, that is just
Yes.
a huge beast that it almost makes you like, there have been projects where I've been like, let's not even deploy this. Let's just rebuild it in production. We'll move all the components that we need, and the actual site, we're not going to touch it. We're just going to basically rebuild the site in production because it just gets so burdensome.
Yes. I wasted hours, if not days, trying to deploy yeah, Experience Cloud, B2B and B2C clouds, crazy
Yeah,
products.
it's a beast.
It's a beast. All right, another topic. Streaming, streaming in Salesforce, something that I am a big fan of. I I don't right now. I don't have that much time, so I don't watch that many streams. But I think this is one of the greatest. When I was a developer, when I was learning how to code, that was one of the greatest sources for me to learn coding. I would just like tune in into like a random stream of a random guy coding, and I would try to understand what are they coding. I would kind of look at the discussions, look at what they discuss, and trying to just absorb everything. And it's just insane how much you can learn, because
Hmm.
you look at other people code, and those people are senior developers. They're experienced. They've been doing it for years. That they're live people in the chat who can help you with the questions that you have. You can also flip the coin and you can stream yourself, and then there are going to be people in the chat going to be helping you to develop something. So it's just an incredible tool which we don't have in Salesforce. We don't have the culture. And what do you think about all of this? Why? Why don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those torches that I think you and I both tried to carry for some time. I know that you were streaming for a while, and that's actually how I got,
Yes,
familiar with you, as I would watch your streams and we would chat back and forth. Um, and
I watched a
then
couple of your streams.
yeah, and then it got to the point where I was like, all right, well, let me try to stream. So I was trying to develop the flow analyzer on stream, and didn't really get much traction, like you were saying. Like, just there isn't the culture there. I don't really understand it. I think that it's kind of the same thing that we see with like the hackathons, where people just, it's not something, people aren't a lot of people aren't interested in working kind of outside their working hours and thinking about Salesforce stuff. I think that there are kind of the select group of folks who would be interested in that. And I mean, I'm sure that, you look at potentially your cohorts with, your teaching. I bet that those are people who would be interested in watching a stream, because those are people who are taking the initiative outside of their working day to learn something new. And if there's an opportunity that where they can hopefully be somewhat entertained, or anything like that, and still learn. Because I would always talk through what I was doing. I'd say, oh, I need to go do this because of this and because of this. And obviously there wasn't much of the context behind, because the app was already released and I was just basically doing new features and things like that on it. um, but yeah, I mean, I think that streaming is something that I would love to continue to carry the torch once I have a little bit more time to do so. It got to the point where I kind of got back into it maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I had done a couple of streams with like a concept that I called over engineered and unimpressed, where I was taking a very simple problem to solve and just over engineering it like crazy. Like I was like, oh, we need to update the status on a case if this happens, and then it would turn into this like million cascading platform events and all of these different things. But the whole concept was, I'm going to teach you every type of event that exists in the Salesforce ecosystem and how you can use it to, achieve this absolutely ridiculous, ridiculously simple concept. But we're going to basically just build some crazy contraption to make it work. um, but that was the whole goal, was to teach. And, again, it just didn't get a ton of traction. People seemed interested in the concept when you post about it, but then you just don't get the engagement when the actual time comes to do the stream.
I think the problem is that with like if you take other programming languages like Java or React or whatever JavaScript, there's already traffic existing there. People already watching a lot of other people, right? And there's a lot. Like, you can just kind of tap into the existing audience. Versus here in Salesforce, if you if you start like streaming, you need to have your own, so you need to bring your own audience, right? This is why when I was streaming, I could kind of bring my own audience. I could like say, hey guys, I'm streaming here, and I would have like some people there. um, but if you don't have this, then streaming itself is not a distribution, right? You cannot grow with streaming. Like streaming is where you're capturing them, where you're building basically the relationship with the audience. But to grow, you need to have whatever TikTok, YouTube, all of this type of things. And I think that right now there's still a big niche for someone to take. Someone who wanna take this like basically nerdy niche of like really people who are into the technical stuff of Salesforce, right? So like me and you who are more, like into the development side rather than just general admin. And I think there still needs to be someone who is going into like this crazy like streaming a lot, like every week for a couple of hours, then uploading YouTube, like heavy developer channel, because there isn't much, right? This isn't much stuff like this.
I mean, you look at the Salesforce developer docs, and while they're great, it's always, there's a concept and there's a one pager on it. And
Yeah.
okay, like it's like, okay, I can read that whole page and still not know anything about how I actually need to build this. Like I was actually learning things while I was on stream, like, oh, I didn't realize I needed to have like, because I would just spin up a scratch org, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize I needed to have this like particular beta setting enabled or something to make this work. So it was like all of this stuff where, I never did like dry runs of any of this. It was always like I had an idea and I had kind of a general framework of what I was going to do. But I think the most interesting part of it was that I would say 60% of the time, at least, the thing that I built did not work the first time. And we were debugging on stream. And I was like, that's useful to me because, for people who haven't ever had to debug something, like you're teaching folks Apex, and the hope is that they're learning some debugging skills if they're not doing things correctly the first time around. But and I'm assuming you're teaching some debugging skill set, but that really is something where that's a skill set in its own. You need to know how to evaluate if something's not working, why.
Also, you can flip it. If someone is listening to it, you can flip it. And even if you're just trying to learn something, you still can stream and you still can produce a lot of content. Because it's also interesting to see someone actually figuring stuff out. And this way you can maybe people gonna come to you on the stream and gonna help you for free to like just learn something new and grow faster. And this is a really good opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely, once things slow down a little bit with the day job and everything, I definitely plan on kind of continuing to do the streaming because I thought it was rewarding. I thought I was a lot more productive when I was working on the flow analyzer and I was on stream because it just makes you focus. Like, when you're working on something, then you might be tempted to step away, or you might be tempted to just like go and, randomly do something else for a little bit of time. But like when you're streaming, it's like you're on task and you know that hopefully people are watching you, and you want to kind of keep them entertained and make sure that you're kind of doing the thing that you are promising them that you're going to be doing. So
This is also one of the benefits. Yeah, when I was, like when I'm working sometimes, you're like, let me open YouTube, let me open Netflix here on the side, let me put the music or something. But when you're streaming, you can't do that. You have to actually be coding.
Yeah, exactly.
That was good. That's all I had. But I have also a little bit unrelated thing. How much you bench press?
Uh, I mean, I think that the most I've ever benched was like 375. I was
That's
always
what
more of
in
a
the pounds or what is
pounds,
the
yes. I was always
the
more of a squats and deadlifts. The lower body lifts was what I was best at. I actually did competed in powerlifting for some time, and set a couple of records in the deadlift. I ended up my heaviest deadlift that I ever did was 352.5 kilo,
oh wow,
so
crazy,
almost 800 pounds.
crazy, crazy. I recently got into it. I was never like really into this. I was more into like martial arts and all of this, like boxing and all of this. But now I'm more serious about this. So I started doing squats and the bench press, and it's a really cool thing, especially the squats. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do anything crazy heavy anymore because I'm in my 30s, so everything is falling apart. But I definitely try and still, hit the gym and everything when I can. It's definitely been less frequent with the two little kids running around, but we do what we can, right?
That's true.